In the second part of my chat with Ed Dentzel, host of the Unfound podcast, we're going to talk about another bizarre death. Unlike the Blair Adams case that we talked about last week, there is controversy and downright confusion about not only her death, but the months and even years leading up to it. Let's talk about Cindy James. Cynthia Elizabeth Hack was born on June 12, 1944. Her parents were Otto and Tilly Hack. She had 3 older brothers and 2 younger sisters. The family lived in British Columbia and then lived in Ottawa, Ontario. In 1962, Cindy enrolled in nursing school in Vancouver, British Columbia. While she was there, her father had re-enlisted in the Air Force and relocated the family to France. Cindy would visit them there during the holidays. In the summer of 1965, Cindy met a psychiatrist named Roy Makepeace, who was 18 years her senior. Roy Makepeace would leave his wife after meeting Cindy. Then in 1966, Cindy would graduate nursing school with her BSN. In December of that year, Roy Makepeace and Cindy would marry. There were warning signs early on in their marriage. Cindy would make accusations of spousal abuse. The family also shared concerns due to the age difference and said that Roy took advantage of Cindy's naivete and gullibility. Roy Makepeace would accept a job as assistant professor in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of British Columbia. Cindy would work as a pediatric nurse at Vancouver General Hospital. She would then go to work at a Vancouver facility caring for children with behavioral disorders. She would work there for the next 12 years and was highly thought of due to her competence and professionalism. In May of 1982, after 16 years of marriage, Roy and Cindy Makepeace would separate. Then 4 months later, in September of 1982, Cindy told friends and family members that she suspected a prowler had been lurking around her home. On October 7, 1982, she would start receiving a series of obscene phone calls. She would tell her parents that the calls were an individual speaking in different voices, and some were sexual or violent in nature. Sometimes there was only silence on the other end. The menacing calls would become more frequent throughout October. Cindy would report them to the RCMP. They visited her home and they suggested that she keep a list detailing each call and get an unlisted phone number. Then later in October, she would report that she saw someone lurking outside her home. The next morning, her porch lights were smashed. Then she reported in 2 separate incidents a rock being thrown through one of her windows and someone entering her home and slashing a pillow from her bed. Constable Patrick McBride would suspect Cindy James' ex-husband Roy Makepeace. Cindy had told friends and coworkers that he was violent and abusive during their marriage, but she did not think that he was capable of tormenting her like this. Cindy had rented out her basement to 2 people, and they would hear strange noises on the main floor after she left for work. A neighbor would report seeing a man standing near Cindy's house on at least 3 different occasions. They insisted that this unknown man did not resemble Roy Makepeace. Soon after Cindy would report all of these strange occurrences, she would begin a personal relationship with the RCMP constable Pat McBride. He had recently separated from his wife and then moved into Cindy's house on October 31st, 1982. Cindy would explain that McBride had offered to move in for 2 weeks to help monitor the area in case the perpetrator appeared. Several days after moving in, McBride would notice Roy Makepeace sitting in his car in an alley behind Cindy's house. When confronted, Makepeace would say that he was there to catch Cindy's intruder in the act. McBride would tell Makepeace that he was living there now, so he left. A few weeks after moving in, McBride claimed that he had gotten one of the mysterious phone calls while at Cindy's house when Cindy was present. The caller spoke no words, but he could hear a woman's voice in the background that sounded like it was coming over a public address system. The call was traced to a suburb of Vancouver named Richmond. Later that same month, Cindy would find a note pinned to her windshield that pictured a corpse under a medical sheet. Shortly after that incident, McBride noticed that the phone lines outside Cindy's home had been cut in 5 different places. In December of 1982, Pat McBride would move out of Cindy's house, although the two continued to casually date. Cindy would also maintain a friendly relationship with her ex, Roy Makepeace. She would even invite both men over at the same time to discuss the alleged attacker, as they both were obsessed with finding them. Then on the week of Christmas 1982, Cindy found a note outside her house that said "Merry Christmas" and contained a photo of a woman with her throat slashed in red ink. In late January of 1983, Cindy's co-worker, Agnes Woodcock, would visit her at her house. She found Cindy lying unconscious in her backyard with a nylon stocking around her neck. When Cindy regained consciousness, she told Agnes that she had been attacked from behind while walking to her exterior garage. She said he brought her into the garage where there was another man waiting, and they both strangled her. She then claimed a form of sexual assault with an instrument that I won't graphically describe, and him threatening her sister Melanie if Cindy reported the attack to authorities. She was taken to the hospital, and reportedly they could not find definitive evidence of sexual assault. Cindy was asked to see a psychiatrist, but declined because she was afraid of the stigma attached with that. She did agree to see a general practitioner who had experience in counseling. After the first violent incident, Cindy would move to a house in West Vancouver in early February of 1983. Soon after, she would receive threatening letters and obscene calls. Cindy would then move again just 2 months later. Meanwhile, Roy Makepeace was trying to reconcile with his wife. He would shower her with lavish gifts that summer and also paid to fly her to Indonesia to visit her brother Roger. Several weeks after returning from her trip abroad in late August, she would receive a threatening note that was welcoming her back. Cindy would even paint her car a different color in hopes of concealing her identity. Then Cindy James would make a proactive move. She would hire private investigator Ozzie Caban to help figure out who her stalker was. She would pay him for the next 6 years. Cindy would go to extensive lengths to protect herself. She wore a portable panic button and kept pepper spray with her at all times. Between October and November of 1983, Cindy would discover the remains of 3 cats in her garden, strangled and bound with rope. In a private diary, Cindy would accuse her ex Makepeace of destroying her garden in the backyard. Cindy received numerous phone calls both at home and at work, and some were answered by her co-workers. They would say the person on the other end did not speak. Then in 1984, the attacks would escalate and happen more frequently. In January of that year, Caban heard strange noises on a 2-way radio that he'd given Cindy. When he arrived at her home, he found Cindy lying unconscious on her living room floor with a paring knife stabbed through her hand. Also attached with the knife was a threatening note with ransom-type lettering. Cindy claims that before she went unconscious, she witnessed a man coming through her gate who assaulted her and hit her over the head with a blunt object. She then recalled her attacker inserting a needle in her arm. Doctors did find a needle mark, but found no traces of any drugs in her system. Cindy would be asked to take a polygraph, but the results were uncertain. Some reports say that she passed, but the man who conducted the test would say in his estimation it was inconclusive. A constable who had responded to Cindy's home that night would say that he observed blood smeared in circular patterns on the kitchen floor, as if someone was trying to clean up evidence. In February of 1984, Cindy would tell police that now she did feel that her ex, Roy Makepeace, was the one tormenting her. Authorities began to question him more intensely. Makepeace would theorize that he felt Cindy's attackers were part of the mafia and connected to Cindy's job where she worked with children who were wards of the court. In March of 1984, Cindy's father, Otto Hack, would meet with Makepeace while wearing a police wiretap. He told Makepeace to cease contact with his daughter. After the meeting, Makepeace would write Otto Hack a 6-page letter outlining his theory that the mafia was after Cindy and urged her father to pursue this angle. Throughout the summer of 1984, Cindy would report multiple cases of harassment, broken windows, threatening phone calls, and even an assault by a bearded man driving a green van with a female passenger. She would be taken to the hospital where the doctors observed 2 puncture marks on her arm. While Cindy was in the hospital, a receptionist working there said a man with an accent called the front desk inquiring about the hospital's security policy. When police played the officer Roy Makepeace's voice, who was from South Africa, she said that she felt that it was a strong possibility that it was the same person who called. Cindy James was now under the care of a hypnotist. In early of 1985, she would tell him that she had witnessed her ex-husband murder a man and woman and dismember their bodies with an axe while on vacation at Thormanby Island in 1981. It was discovered that her sister Melanie was with her on that vacation, and she had no recollection of anything sinister occurring. In June of 1985, Cindy was involuntarily committed to a psychiatric unit at a Vancouver hospital after attempting suicide by an overdose of prescription drugs. But Cindy would say that she did not intend to kill herself. She would wear a wiretap and call Makepeace and accuse him of being her attacker. He denied this, calling his ex-wife insane and having an enormous revenge fantasy. RCMP would briefly have Cindy, Roy Makepeace, and 2 other unnamed suspects under 24/7 surveillance for a week, but canceled it after nothing unusual happened. In late summer and early fall of 1984, Cindy would report bizarre packages left at her house along with threatening notes. There were 3 fires. The most significant one was on August 21, 1985. When police and firefighters arrived, they observed Ozzie, Caban, and Cindy in a heated discussion when she told the PI that she had taken her dog out for a walk at 3:15 a.m. and returned to find a fire in her bathroom basement. A window in that room was ajar. However, the windowsill showed dust and soot, indicating that no one had entered or exited it. A detective investigating the fire later said that he believes Cindy started the blaze. In the fall of 1985, psychologist Dr. Anthony Marcus was requested by the RCMP to interview Cindy and examine the case file. Marcus would eventually offer that in his professional opinion, Cindy may have been suffering from dissociative identity disorder, possibly stemming from a traumatic childhood incident. Strangely, though, he did not question Cindy about her early life during their interviews. In early 1986, Cindy would formally change her last name from Makepeace to James, hoping to further conceal her identity. Cindy's friends, Tom and Agnes Woodcock, would sometimes spend the night at Cindy's home. On April 16, 1986, Cindy would wake the couple up and tell them that she heard a commotion in the house. They investigated that there was another fire started in the basement. They tried to phone the fire department, but discovered the phone was dead. Tom would go across the street to use the neighbor's phone, and he saw a man standing on the street outside the residence, but when Tom approached, he fled. Cindy would then stay with the Woodcocks for several days after the fire. They reported that Cindy refused to eat and said that life was not worth living. A psychiatrist named Alan Connolly, who had been treating Cindy since January of 1983, met with her. Dr. Connolly, who had always believed Cindy's claims, feared that she was suicidal, so he had her committed to the psychiatric ward for 2 weeks. They observed while there that Cindy was suffering from anorexia and depression. Cindy would be released after a 10-week stay. She would tell her father that she had been withholding information and told him something surprising about the attacks. She now said that she knew who her assailant was, but refused to tell anyone his identity. The cycle of vandalism, threatening notes, and phone calls would unfortunately continue through 1987 and 1988. In October of 1988, Roy Makepeace would receive strange messages on his home answering machine concerning Cindy. Makepeace didn't trust the Vancouver police, so he gave the answering machine tapes to his attorney. Then 15 days later, in October of 1988, Cindy was found unconscious and hogtied in her garage. She was naked from the waist down and had a black nylon stocking tied around her neck. The RCMP consulted a knot expert and mountain climber to analyze the knots on the nylon stockings that she had been bound with. In his opinion, it was very unlikely that Cindy would have been able to tie the knots herself. The RCMP would estimate that over the past 7 years, they had spent 1 to 1.5 million Canadian money, which is the equivalent of well over 3 million Canadian money in 2025, in resources in investigating her claims, but found no evidence to corroborate them. Authorities believe that Cindy was inventing the incidents herself. Cindy expressed her frustration with the RCMP, except Detective Jerry Anderson, whom she trusted, and would file a complaint against them. Then in the spring of 1989, this already tragic story would get even worse. On May 25, 1989, Cindy James picked up her paycheck at Richmond General Hospital. She spoke with a co-worker who said that she was in good spirits, and Cindy told her that she hadn't had any suspicious activity at her home for at least 2 weeks. Cindy then purchased groceries at a Safeway supermarket and went to the Bank of Montreal at the Blundell Shopping Center. A customer remembers standing behind Cindy at the ATM as she deposited her paycheck. They estimated that it was around 8 p.m. Cindy had also planned on having an infrared detection system installed in her home for security purposes that day. She invited her friends Tom and Agnes over to play bridge and spend the night. Despite their plans, the Woodcocks didn't hear from Cindy that day, so they went to her home at 10 p.m. that night. They found her house locked and Cindy's car, a 1981 powder blue Chevy Citation, gone. They briefly spoke with Cindy's basement tenant, who said that Cindy mentioned earlier that she was going to do some shopping. The Woodcocks went to the shopping center that they knew Cindy frequented and found her empty car in the parking lot. The Woodcocks then drove to the Richmond RCMP station to report Cindy James missing. Even though she had only been missing a few hours, given her past and all of the reported acts of violence, they dispatched a patrol car right away to investigate. When police examined Cindy's car, they found blood inside the car on the driver's side door. They also found groceries and a wrapped birthday gift for her friend's young son. They would find the contents of her wallet lying underneath her vehicle. Cindy James's home was in perfect order with everything in its place. Several days after her disappearance, Cindy's basement tenant, who had sold Cindy life insurance, told authorities that he had received a call at his office from a man claiming to be Cindy James' father. He asked about her life insurance policy. He told him that he needed to visit his office and private insurance matters could not be discussed over the phone. However, when authorities questioned Cindy's father, Otto Hack, he said that he had never made such a call. Then on June 8, 1989, 14 days after she was last seen, Don Vinish, a paving worker, discovered Cindy's deceased body in the backyard of an abandoned house at 8111 Blundell Road in Richmond, less than a mile from the shopping center. Her body had been hogtied with rope behind her back, and a black nylon stocking was tied around her neck. He described the remains as having maggots and her face black from decomposition. The area where her remains were found was along a busy street near an intersection that had frequent foot traffic. On the propane tank at the property in orange paint were the words, "Some bitch died here." Then a line of spray paint traveled from the fuel tank to where her body was laying. Inside the abandoned house, they would find the word devil spray painted as well. A pathologist who examined Cindy's body at the scene would describe that her hands had been bound so tightly that one finger had scratched another one down to the bone. A pinprick, thought to be from a needle, was discovered on the inner right elbow of the body. Based on insect and larvae activity, a forensic entomologist would estimate that the body could have begun decomposing where it was as early as June 2nd, 6 days before she was discovered. A full autopsy was done on Cindy's body. Her cause of death was listed as multiple drug intoxication. She had substantial amounts of morphine, diazepam, and flurazepam in her system. Her toxicology report showed that she had 10 times the legal dose of morphine in her body. Based on her stomach contents, a toxicologist reported that Cindy had taken either 20 3-milligram tablets of diazepam or up to 80 tablets if it was a lower dose. They weren't able to tell how the morphine was taken in by Cindy. There were traces of morphine in her stomach. They said that if she had been injected with the morphine, it would have rendered her unconscious within minutes and dead within several hours. The overdose was so large they were not able to determine how long Cindy could have remained functional. The RCMP, due to their past history examining Cindy James' claims, suspected that her death was a suicide or accident. Ozzie Caban would view Cindy's body at the morgue. He noticed the lividity, which is the settling of blood after death, was visible on the left side of the body. However, Cindy was found on her right side, so Caban felt that she may have died elsewhere and her body was relocated to the site where it was ultimately found. It was said that where Cindy was found is a fairly visible area, so it is unlikely that her body could have remained there for several days without anyone noticing. 2 days before her 45th birthday, on June 14, 1989, Cindy James would be laid to rest. Police would surveil the memorial service using hidden cameras and would capture the face and license plate of everyone who attended. Roy Makepeace did not attend. Shortly after her death, the abandoned house that was on the property where Cindy James was found was demolished. There would be an extensive coroner's inquest into Cindy James' death that would take place in the spring of 1990. It would last 40 days and had testimony from over 80 witnesses. There were 5 jurors chosen. At the time, it was the longest and most expensive inquest in British Columbia history. One of the witnesses to testify was Cindy's ex, Roy Makepeace. He had a lot to say, and none of it was good. Roy Makepeace would accuse the police of attempting to frame him. Cindy's ex-husband would then make various claims against the Hack family, alleging that her father had physically abused her and one of her brothers had molested her. It was revealed that, shortly after Cindy's death, her parents had uncovered a hoard of various medications in her home that included sedatives and antipsychotic drugs, which were prescribed by psychiatrists. When they found the medication, they flushed it down the toilet. Cindy's sister Melanie Hack would find a glass cutter in Cindy's purse, as well as a medical syringe kit, a urinary catheter, and saline solution in her bedroom. There was also testimony from several psychiatrists and psychologists, some of whom had personally treated her. Their opinions on her diagnosis range from various types of personality disorders to PTSD. There was also a not expert brought in to demonstrate how Cindy could have tied herself up in the way that she did before the effects of the narcotics in her system took effect. On May 25th, 1990, exactly 1 year after Cindy's death, after deliberating, the jury was unable to determine whether her death was suicide, homicide, or accidental. It was then ruled that Cindy James died from an unknown event, and her case was officially closed. The case would get some added attention when a recreation was featured on Unsolved Mysteries on February 10th, 1991. It would feature interviews with Cindy's parents, Ozzie Caban, reporter Neil Hall, and others. It appears, however, that no new information would be discovered after the airing. Okay, so we have Ed Dentzel back, and now we're going to discuss the very bizarre case of Cindy James. And let me tell you, analyzing Blair Adams and Cindy James back to back, I'm just mentally exhausted with the research. These are pretty heavy cases.
Right, and I think both of these both have their own Wikipedia pages. Not only are they on Unsolved Mysteries, but I think they both have their own Wikipedia pages, which we know that a lot of true crime cases do not, so that certainly makes them unique.
There have been 2 entire books written about Cindy James. There's so much because there's, 7 years, of unexplained occurrences. So what did you think when you first kind of dug into this case?
I think just like Blair, as a person who does disappearances, and as everybody would imagine, we talk a lot about mental health. Cover a lot of disappearances where people, before they went missing, are saying they're after me. The very vague "they're after me," as in contraction THEY''RE. They're after me, but these people never say who they are. And I usually just say nobody is after these people. And so that was the first thing that occurred to me, saying somebody's after me, but she never identified, anybody with any sort of solidity that the police could even look into, check somebody's alibis. I knew they looked at her ex-husband, but you just always have to be very suspicious of a person really seeing reality for what it is when they say somebody's after me, but then you give them all the opportunities in the world to explain who it is, and the person doesn't.
Yeah,
that's a telltale sign of mental health issues.
So what do you think of Corporal Pat McBride? He's the guy that came over as a policeman, but basically moved in 2 weeks later.
I don't.
Isn't that so bizarre?
As a street guy, let me just say, I have a very low opinion of a guy that would move in like that, and then I have to question that guy's sanity for moving in with a woman who is seemingly having these problems, whether she was being stalked or not. That sounds like you're adding a lot of drama in your life.
It's so inappropriate, I'm surprised he kept his job, honestly, because I don't know how things were back then, and it was Canada, but
he might have felt sorry for her, and of course, I will tell you that Cindy, not an unattractive woman.
Yeah.
And very well could be that he was attracted to her, and I'm going to come in and I'm riding with on my white horse, and I'm just going to save her.
Yeah, damsel in distress.
That's hard for me to identify with because I've never been like that my entire life. So I don't know. I have a very low opinion of guys who do that.
Yeah,
have that sort of attitude. So, that's kind of where I am. Of course, it's very unethical. It's not illegal, it's not immoral, but it's certainly unethical for what he did. Yeah.
And, they talk about maybe some possible childhood trauma that Cindy had. And I actually found today that Cindy actually had a brother that died when he was 4.5 years old. And Cindy would have been 6. Now, I don't know the details. All it said was that he died at his home. But, I mean, we don't know what all went on with Cindy in her past, whether she had some trauma, and that could have played a factor in everything or not. So
It could have. It could have, but it just seems like I mean, what are we supposed to think? There's some ghost following her around. I realized, like, for example, that fire, that couple went over and stayed with her. Once again, I would urge anybody who's listening to this, don't do that. Yeah. Don't try to save these people. Don't go and live with them and keep an eye on them. Don't do that. You are asking for trouble. These people luckily survived their encounter with Cindy, in this fire and everything. But the guy said, I went outside and there was a guy, watching the house. Well, yeah, you know what? People do walk by, and when a house is on fire, people do stop and watch. It would have been weirder if the guy walked by and didn't pay any attention.
And he yells, call the police, and the guy's like, I'm getting out of here. I didn't start this fire.
Right, and that's, a lot of people are like that. I don't want anything to do with it. Yeah. It very well could be that guy wasn't supposed to be out there. Maybe he was coming back from his mistress's house.
Yeah.
For all we know. I'm not supposed to be here. It had nothing to do with Cindy or the fire or anything, but on the other hand, he wasn't supposed to be out there. He told his wife, he's something else or something.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people doing things out there they shouldn't be doing. That doesn't mean what they're doing is criminal.
Yeah. So I was trying to put my thoughts together about this case, and a lot of the things that happened, Cindy could have absolutely done. But there's a couple of things that she really, couldn't have done if everyone is telling the truth. I remember that the Woodcocks, the couple, said, well, we were sitting here and the phone line was fine, and an hour later it was cut in 5 places, and Cindy didn't leave the room. So then I wondered, I have it like a third theory. So Roy Makepeace was a perfect suspect because, number one, he's a psychiatrist. Who better to mess with your head than a psychiatrist? And they had just just split up when all this started happening. He wanted her back, clearly. And so first I thought maybe he did do a few of the harassing things just to scare Cindy into maybe inviting him back. Then I'm not so sure that Pat McBride wouldn't have done a few things just to kind of, ramp up her fear, because he liked being there. He liked taking care of her. And maybe Cindy liked all the attention and all the compassion that she got. And maybe Cindy just kind of took over after that, and kind of took it to a whole other level.
I guess the word would be gaslighting, like from the movie. They could have certainly been gaslighting her, certainly. Yeah. And of course, my perception, that goes a lot of that goes on in relationships every day. Once again, me showing my singleness at 55. but it's, I just don't think that was, it could have been a very, very small factor.
Yeah.
But I'm inclined to believe that really Cindy did do all of this to herself.
Now there was many phone calls, and that's the one thing I couldn't get past, because I think nowadays we probably could have figured that out, how to arrange a phone call. And I do know that most of them, there was no one speaking. But is there a way that she could have had these phone calls made if she wasn't actually making the call?
Back at the time, the technology was there to have calls made at certain times. If she had a machine like that, certainly technologically it could have happened back then. Yeah. But what sticks out to me is, how is it that she was the one who always answered the phone? Even when she had other people living with her, she was the one who answered the phone. It doesn't seem like anybody else answered the phone and had this happen. Only when Cindy answered the phone were the calls harassment calls. Or am I perceiving that the wrong way?
Well, I think like I said, if everyone's telling the truth, Pat McBride claimed that he got one, and the Woodcocks claim that they've answered, but that was very few, and she could have done that on purpose. Maybe she told someone, hey, give me a call tonight, and she knew, but I don't know. I mean, she could have had someone helping her,
you'd think that person would have come forward, unless that person was her accomplice, and then that's the person who killed her. Once again, this is getting so complicated. I mean, really. I mean, then we have to think, well, what was the plan this whole time? I mean, if she had some accomplice doing that, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
You know, it really, 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 really gets complicated, and it's a great movie plot or novel plot, but this just isn't how reality works. Not my perception of it.
Yeah.
My perception of Cindy is that I think she did have mental health issues, but I think she also observed that she only got attention when she was having problems.
Right. I agree.
And what happens, it's one of those things where people reward bad behavior. When you do that, you get more bad behavior. And she thought that, well, if I did this and I did that and I lie about this, look, everybody's caring about me. It's like that, what's that, Hudsucker by Proxy or whatever? Not Hudsucker, that's Hudsucker. That's the movie. Munchausen by Proxy.
Yeah.
That's funny. I just messed it up. Munchausen by Proxy, where a parent causes illness in their child so as to get sympathy. It's very well documented. It is real. Yes. And I can't help but think that Cindy was doing a version of that.
Yes.
And I will even go as far as to say that Cindy dying like that, I'm not convinced she was trying to kill herself.
Right.
I think it seemed to me, my perception, you've read all this. I, of course, read about it, but I think you're more versed in all of this than I am. That it did seem that each thing was getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And she was getting more attention and more attention and more attention and more attention. And I think that what happened on the day that she actually died is she just took it one step too far.
Right, and I'm
not convinced that she was actually trying to die that day. She was just going to tie herself up, knock herself out, somebody would find her, and she'd even more prove that somebody was after her. Except that's not the way it went.
Yeah, I think a factor people aren't thinking about is Cindy laid there at least for days, they think. So maybe Cindy thought somebody would see her. It was fairly, it was a lot of people walking in that area. Maybe she did that thinking somebody would find her and rescue her, but yet no one seemed to know or care for days.
Right. This is just taking it too far. That's the way I perceive this. I realize there's a lot of people who are going to believe this and think somebody was stalking her, and women do get stalked, and stalkers do kill women. But for it to go on this long, I can't even begin to tell you how many people around her would have had to have been totally incompetent and senile and everything else to not be able to determine who was doing this. I'm not going to say there wasn't a couple harassing phone calls, but you know what? Ex-husbands and ex-boyfriends, maybe not these days because we could trace everybody everywhere. But you know what? Ex-boyfriends and ex-husbands back in the day did make harassing phone calls after breakups and everything else. That was the way of the world for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I watched a 2-part Crime Beat documentary about Cindy called Terror in the Shadows, and it was very interesting and it had a lot of interviews. They brought up a very interesting diagnosis that they wonder if Cindy had, and that is DID, dissociative identity disorder, which we used to call, split personalities. And one of her friends said she would see Cindy, and one time Cindy acted really happy, really manic, and she was buying all these clothes that were absolutely nothing like she would wear. I mean, that was just an example. And Roy Makepeace, the ex, his daughter would say in the end that Roy Makepeace eventually did believe that she had that as well, because he thought that was the only way that she could have perpetrated this for this many years.
Like I said, I'm not saying that Cindy was sane and saw the reality like the rest of us. She certainly had a lot of things going on. But I would say that creating these things, as I think she did, is a form of mental health problems.
Yes.
Just because you have a mental health problem doesn't mean you can't come up with a plan to make it look like somebody harmed you.
Yeah.
But it very well in her mind might have been, yeah, somebody is after me, nobody believes me, so I'm going to do this. And then pretend that somebody else did it, even though I did it. It's kind of like almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I've been having my notes. It's kind of like the Lord Voldemort example from from Harry Potter. If everybody forgets this, it's kind of gotten lost in all the movies and everything. But the reason it even started is because there was a prophecy that there was a child that was going to come along and destroy him. And so he wanted to destroy Harry Potter first. Well, in trying to destroy Harry Potter, he brought about his own destruction. You know what I mean? And maybe if you let the prophecy go, that wouldn't have happened. And so I kind of feel like the same thing with Cindy, is that some sort of paranoia. She thought people were after her, and when nobody was believing her, she just went about really, really trying to show people by staging things. And guess what? She brought about her own demise.
Right.
But it's just I also, there is an example in my own life. I will never mention any names, but there was a woman that I dated, and she claimed that she was being stalked. And we did not live close to each other at the time, but she would tell me about it over the phone, and I'd go down to see her. And one night we went past this gas station, and there was a guy in a car there, and I was in the car behind her, and we did a U-turn. She said that was the guy that's been stalking me, but he'd already pulled away at that point. And we broke up for a lot of different reasons, and I still continue to communicate with her. And then just a couple years ago, I brought that up to her. Remember when you were being stalked, and do you remember that? And we were going down that road, and you made the U-turn, and you thought the stalker. She didn't remember any of it.
Oh, wow.
And it convinced me this is just something she was making up.
Yeah.
I wasn't the one getting stalked. She was the one that was allegedly getting stalked. I remember it like it was yesterday. She says, I don't remember that at all.
Wow.
And so that's the kind of way I see Cindy as well. That, just creating stories, but she just was going way, way further than this woman that I knew.
Yeah, she really did like the attention and the sympathy, and she just kind of did whatever she had to do to get it. I mean, I don't think we'll ever have all the answers. Some of the things you kind of wonder if somebody else was helping or whatever, but I definitely think that she had a hand in most, if not all of them.
The problem we have, Heather, is we're both sane people. And, logical people. And what we're trying to do is trying to logically explain something that really is not logical and not rational.
Right.
Okay? To Cindy, it was. Even to Blair, going back to the previous case, it was probably sane in their mind. And they had all this way they were getting from point A to point B to point C logically in their minds. For the rest of us, it just looks like a big jumble.
Yeah.
And so when I think the average person who is also sane maybe sees the Unsolved Mysteries episode or listening to this and reads about it wherever, they think, well, this couldn't be possible. Surely somebody had to have done this. And all that's really doing is underestimating the lengths people will go to if they're not seeing reality the way it is. And I don't think that we can ever underestimate that.
Yes, the mysteries of the mind. Yeah.
Yes. Right.
Okay, Ed. Right. Well, it was nice chatting with you, and these are some pretty intense cases that we talked about today. But
yeah, I would say anybody that, if any of this is sounding familiar, you have any people in your lives who sound like Blair or Cindy, I urge you to get those people help.
Yes.
Don't let it escalate. If they say they're being followed and everything else, but they never use any names or anything else, there's probably nobody stalking them, nobody's after them. It's all in their head, and this could go to some very bad places. You need to get these people help, because we know these people are probably not going to get help on their own.
Right. Okay, Ed, I appreciate the call, and everyone check out his Unfound podcast. He's got lots of cases, and he really takes them seriously, and I really appreciate that. So we'll
thank you, Heather.
Talk to you later, Ed.
Okay, talk to you later.
Dr. Roy Makepeace would pass away in 2013 at the age of 87. His daughter would tell Crime Beat that her father always loved Cindy and would hang a picture of her up wherever he was living up until his death. Cindy's parents, Otto and Tilly Hack, both have now passed away. Otto in 1988 at the age of 70, and Tilly died in 2015 at the age of 95. They died with still so many unanswered questions concerning the death of their daughter. So just as mysterious as the troubling incidents that had happened to Cindy over the past 7 years, her death proved to be just as mysterious. Given everything that she had been through the last several years and the terrible way her life ended, this is definitely a disturbing death. So that concludes my podcast on the death of Cindy James. Once again, a special thank you to my friend Ed Dentzel from the Unfound podcast for analyzing these cases with me. Definitely check out his Unfound podcast. You can find me on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. All of my original articles and links to my most recent podcasts can be found at my website at Lost and Found Blogs. I also have accounts on Facebook, X, and Instagram under that name. I have a Lost and Found podcast account on Patreon, where I also post articles and podcasts of lesser-known missing persons cases. You can reach me at Lost and Found Podcast at Yahoo. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.